Welcome to We Are Old, Get Over It, the podcast where we celebrate the wisdom of age and maybe a little grumbling too. And we're going. So I just want to make sure I pronounce your name correctly. It's Amy Goyer?
Goyer.
Goyer.
Goy rhymes with boy.
Okay, Amy. I'm just going to call you Amy, okay? Because I'll just mess up your name.
Okay.
Well, I want to welcome everyone to the podcast. I want to make one notice to everybody who is doing a video, is watching us on video today or whenever they're watching this. As you know, this is not my normal face, okay? I had a dermatologist give me a treatment. I will, by the time you see this video, I will be improved. Maybe not improved, but I will not blush as much, okay? All right, so now we're gonna start the podcast. And the subject for today is the state of caregiving in America. And Amy is the lead speaker for the AARP. And if you ever have turned 50 years old or thereafter, you have gotten letters from the AARP. And many of you are members of the AARP, and that's a wonderful organization. I'm going to be talking about an article, actually it's a study called Caregiving in the United States. There is an executive summary on it. I have it here in front of me. This is the executive summary. I will tell you that I read the 40-page report, okay? You don't need to read it. First of all, half of it is in Spanish, which is fine if you speak Spanish, but otherwise you can skip those pages. Okay. The second thing is that the summary, which is 4 pages long, which we will put on our website so you can access it, if that's okay with Amy. Is that all right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Then it will basically give you some background information on what it says. So my guest today is Amy from the AARP, and Amy is the, let's say, she's the National Family and Caregiving expert for the AARP. Did I say that correctly?
Absolutely right. Yep.
Okay. And you've authored many, many publications, and you've been on so much media that it's hard to track all the stuff that you've done, which includes virtually every television station, all major newspapers in the United States, and you have a lot of personal experience with caregiving. So I want to welcome you to We Are Old, Get Over It, even though you're not old, okay? And you're not familiar with the podcast, but I always start out and I end usually with a quote. And one of the quotes today is from a famous lady, Rosalind Carter, who passed away last year, I think. And this is her quote. "There are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be the caregivers, and those who will need a caregiver." And with that, Amy and I are going to go into this conversation. And again, I want to welcome you and thank you for taking the time away from your background and it was difficult to get a hold of you. I had to work through Danny. And you and I know Danny well at this point. But again, thank you very much.
I'm very lucky to have Danny helping me out.
Okay, great. So let's get started. I'm going to give you the first question, and then I don't really want to lead you in the discussion. I want you to lead me in the discussion. Pretend that I'm somebody who knows virtually nothing. Okay, so to start, what's the single most important takeaway from this report that I brought up? What does it reveal about caregiving landscape in the United States today? And then we'll just go on from there. It's all yours, Amy.
I think the thing about this report is that it's very sobering, and it really helps you understand the sense of urgency when it comes to family caregiving in the U.S. The numbers are growing. We know that family caregivers are needing more and more support. We have 63 million family caregivers in America now, and they're providing ongoing care for older adults We know that it's a 45% increase from 2015, 5 years ago. We do
Wait,
this report about every
could you
5 years.
repeat that? I think that's a significant number. Could you repeat that? What's the
Yeah,
increase
it's a
and from when?
45% increase from 2015 to 2025.
So that's in
So
10-year period, it
in 10
increased
years,
45%.
sorry, 10, not 5. Yeah. And that's a really big jump. When we look at previous increases, this is a really, really fast growing. And part of that is because baby boomers are aging. I'm on the tail end of the baby boomers. You're probably a baby boomer. We're all, if we're lucky, we're aging. And as we get older, we might need more help and support. And we find that as these numbers are growing, the amount of support, while it's gotten better in the past 10 years, it's not growing at the pace that caregivers need. So, we see maybe there are some more services, but not nearly enough to support these family caregivers. So it's really, the report is really helpful to understand this rapidly growing population and what it means to be a caregiver and what our needs are. There are a few things in the report that are new this time. It's the first time we've ever added some data on paid family caregivers. Some
Describe what a
people,
paid family describe what a
so
paid family caregiver is, please.
yes, so in certain situations, some people can get paid something to provide this care. And the reason this is important is that many people have to quit their jobs or go to part time or retire early in order to care for a family member. And then what does that do to their own income? So in certain situations, not enough, but in certain situations, for example, if you're caring for a veteran, certain veterans are eligible for a program that pays their family caregivers a stipend to help care for them. Now, it's not a lot of money, but it's helps. It's very helpful. Another situation, and it's not all veterans, but certain veterans. I cared for my dad, who was a veteran, and that program was not in place then, and was not. I wouldn't have been eligible because of the veteran has to be eligible because of his service connected injuries or his time of service and that type of thing.
Okay.
Another way is Medicaid. If your loved one is on Medicaid, in some states, they have waivers to provide care in the home for people who would otherwise be in a nursing home. And they, in some states, will pay family members to help provide that care. Again, no one's getting rich off of this, but it's a help when you are not able to do other work to bring in money and to support yourself. So, and there are a lot of stipulations. It varies from state to state. In some places, you can't be living with the person you're providing care for. So that cuts out a lot of people who are caring for their spouse or their parent who lives with them.
Really?
Those are two ways. Another way is if an individual out of their own private funds pays a family member to help provide that care, if you have the funds to do that. And lastly, some people have long-term care insurance. And in some cases, again, the long-term care insurance policies really vary greatly, but some of them will cover in-home care, and some of them may allow the person who's receiving the care to choose who provides that care. So it might be that through the long-term care insurance payments, you might be able to pay a family member. Again, none of these are across the board, and the majority of family caregivers are not getting paid. But it's the first time we've actually looked at that, and because we think caregivers need more paid support and paid family leave from their job if they have to take time off work to care for a loved one.
Okay. And the one of the big problems it seemed that came out in your report was the fact that so many people are not getting a financial support and are actually borrowing money from their own retirement to help them to survive, to pay their rent or to pay their mortgages and to pay for some medical expenses for their others. How do we address that?
Yes, the financial gaps are really so impactful. Many people have some type of impact on their finances. So, for example, 50% of family caregivers face serious financial stress, and about
50%.
50%, and about,
Wow.
I mean, we're talking serious financial stress. 15% can't afford basics like food. And no one should be in that situation because they're caring for someone who needs help. A third leave the workforce temporarily or long term to provide care for their loved ones. There's that financial stress is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart because I cared for both of my parents. I quit my job, became a consultant. I went through a lot. In order to do that, I moved across the country. I had very complicated situations. I was caring for multiple people, both my parents and my sister. And after about a dozen years of very intensive caregiving, I ended up in bankruptcy. And I'm a caregiving expert. So we were doing everything we could possibly do. But my dad had Alzheimer's, again, multiple people. There's so many circumstances that just, I created debt in trying to take care of everyone and didn't take good care of myself financially. So, my suggestion to family caregivers is if you're in a caregiving situation, work with a financial advisor for yourself, not just your loved one's finances, which you may be managing as well and working with their financial advisor, but have someone for yourself too, because this can have very long-term effects on a caregiver's life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, part of the report said what percentages of caregivers are financially unable to really provide the care that they're providing the love and they're being there, but they can't provide the actual services that their elder person needs. Is that correct? And how do we deal with that?
Well, as I said, people have to make choices. So some of them leave the workplace. Some of them take early retirement. They start dipping into their retirement savings in order to make a living, to be able to live while caring for someone. And if they're not able to juggle it, then what happens to that person who needs the care? Sometimes there are programs that can be helpful, but many times they're just not available to that person. It's not consistent, and not every US citizen gets the same access to supports. If you live in a rural area, there are fewer services available. There are many reasons. And, what happens then is the caregiver stops saving. About 1 in 3 stops saving for retirement. That's what happened to me. And then the caregiver's financial security the rest of their life is, in trouble. And then who is going to care for them because they're not going to have the money to pay for care. So it's
Exactly.
really a very vicious circle. About
Yeah,
1 in 4 caregivers have taken on debt like I did.
right. And the report also mentions that for the first time, the AARP evaluated the health of caregivers themselves. Talk about that a little bit and how this taking care of people you want to take care of, how it impacts your life, besides the financial aspects of it.
Right. I think the most important point is that 64% of family caregivers report that they have moderate to high emotional stress. And that underlies and really compromises our health and in our physical health and our mental health in so many ways. That stress is so high. About 24% report feeling alone. Um,
So in
Females
other
in
words, they're feeling alone even though they're with somebody else, but they're feeling alone because they don't have that support for themselves. Is that correct?
Exactly. They are struggling. They're focusing on another person. Their social life slips away because we don't have time to try and keep up other relationships or go out with friends for lunch and do things like that. And then 1 in 5 report their health is fair or poor. That's 20%. 1 in 5 family caregivers. And remember, there's 63 million of them are reporting that their health is not good. And so as the caregiver's health starts to decline, because they're giving so much to the person they're caring for, what we see sometimes is that the caregiver gets so ill and unable or passes away and is not able to care for the care recipient. And
So for
so it,
example, let's say you had a husband and wife first. That's the most common, I would think, of where you see that, because you've got two adults, usually two seniors, that are approximately the same age, within, let's say, 10 years or so, maybe more, but maybe less. Uh, where the one who's stronger is taking care of the other one, but yet personally they're suffering these health, which is making them more insecure in their own health, correct?
correct, correct.
Okay, so
We
how do
make
we
ourselves,
go
I'm
ahead, I'm
just going to
sorry.
say that as caregivers, we are just as vulnerable in many ways, in different ways, as the people we're caring for.
Right. And how do we address that in a country our size, where there are so many caregivers and so many people needing care? Your report looked into that, and what suggestions do they have about that?
Well, one of the key things that we're starting to see is things to help, first of all, with the finances. Caregiver tax credits are starting to gain some traction in the states. Oklahoma and Nebraska both have state level caregiver tax credits. If you're caring for someone, you get a tax credit. And we're seeing these more. There are efforts at the federal level as well to try and have some legislation for tax credits for working family caregivers. We're also seeing, that there are programs like the home and community-based services that have area agencies on aging that provide services that can help caregivers manage the rest of their life. So, for example, maybe there's a meal delivery service. And instead of having to go over and make a meal for your loved one every day, at least one of their meals can be this meal that's delivered through home and community based services.
That's a great
Or they
suggestion.
are, that's also a social contact for your loved one,
Mhm.
because isolation is just as bad for our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's worse than obesity. It's really a big problem for both care recipients and caregivers. And so that meal delivery is somebody who comes to the door, talks with them, sets eyes on them every day. That can be a big help and lower some of the tasks that a caregiver has to do. Another program is respite care. It's really one of the things that caregivers are requesting the most is respite care. And respite care just means it's someone else providing the care so that the caregiver can get a break, the family caregiver can have a break.
And where do they
And that,
get those care? Where do they get those people?
right, so in terms of who's providing the respite care,
Right.
yeah, so excuse me, there are programs that are like the Lifespan Respite Program, which comes down from the federal government down through the states. There are programs generally through the Area Agency on Aging. You can call and find out what respite programs are available in my area. Some states have respite programs for caregivers with state funding that maybe provide a voucher system where you find someone to provide that care for your loved one and you have a voucher to pay them something. And other ones, the VA. We got respite care through the VA for my dad, who was a World War II and Korean War veteran. And part of his health care through the VA, we got about 6 hours of respite care, which would be all in one day, every month or so. And that's not all of it, but it helps. And so, you can look, there's an organization called the Arch Respite Network, ARCH Respite Network. And if you go to archrespite.org/respite locator, you can find there all the respite programs in your area, do a zip code search. You can contact your area agency on aging, as I mentioned, and you can find that through the elder care locator, which is a different program. And that just helps you locate services for older adults in your area. And that's eldercare.acl.gov. And then another option is AARP has caregiver guides for every state. And we have some of the key, like if your state had a caregiver voucher respite program, it would be listed in that guide. And for that, you can go to aarp.org/caregiver resource guides.
Okay. So the most important thing that you said just now is you have the resources available at the AARP.org for caregiving. And most of the information that you just mentioned, I don't have to report on. We can just send people to that website. Is that correct?
Yes, it's aarp.org/caregiving.
Got it.
It opens the door to, we cover everything from caregiving basis, finances, legal issues, care for the caregiver. I just wrote a whole new care for the caregiver guide for AARP that's available free download there. We have another caregiving guide that kind of goes through the basics. We have articles on basically every kind of caregiving issue you could ever want there.
That's great. Well, so we basically have one resource. First of all, we mentioned the fact that they could read the summary, and that will give them some information. But the main information, I think, is actually being able to use the resources that you provided through the AARP, correct?
Absolutely. The bottom line is it helps us to know more about caregivers, because then we know how to focus our efforts to support them. And so, for example, we know that Medicaid is extremely important to family caregivers. There are so many care recipients who are receiving Medicaid, and some caregivers as well. And, that 17 million older Americans rely on Medicaid for long-term services and supports. So we have to be very careful about protecting Medicaid, because that can have a ripple effect against their families, the family caregivers, as well as the people who are needing to receive those services. And then it helps us know things like I mentioned, the Bipartisan Credit for Caring Act at the federal level. We're supporting that because it would provide a $5,000 non-refundable tax credit for working family caregivers. If I had that when I was caregiving, it might have kept me out of bankruptcy. So these things are very practical things that we need on a very basic level. I think caregivers are kind of invisible. You know what I mean?
I agree. I agree. They're giving their love.
Yeah.
They're taking care of their seniors, of people who are usually older than them, not necessarily, and they're not rewarded in any way for this, and it's an emotional stress on everyone involved.
Right, and we're so invisible because we are so isolated. Our life is wrapped around caring for this person, and our networks kind of disappear. People don't know how to support a caregiver if they do know one. So we just urge people, if you know a caregiver in your life, get them some of these resources we've talked about. Get them my new Care for the Caregiver guide that I just finished writing for AARP, which gives you practical things to do on a daily basis to take care of yourself. Connect them with the Area Agency on Aging or other resources in their area. Find out if there's a caregiver support group they might attend, and then go stay with their loved ones so they can go to the meetings and get support from other caregivers. Having that network is everything, because we learn the most from each other too. And to that end, I want to make sure you know about we have a Facebook group on Facebook. It's the AARP Family Caregivers Discussion Group, and I moderate this group. We have over 20,000 family caregivers in this group, and they're very active. And it's a very safe environment where you can post. You can even post anonymously, because Facebook has set that up, and say, we have people who say, I can't do this anymore. I'm really losing it today. Or look at this great thing that happened today. I got Dad to eat his whole dinner. Or, I'm having this very practical issue. How do you deal with this incontinence? What's the best solution or the best product to help with incontinence? Or how do I navigate through the insurance company? Very practical things. And so we do a lot of help problem solving, and just a whole lot of moral support in there.
Give me
It
a little bit
helps you
more
know that you're
information
not
on
the
it.
only one.
Give me a little bit more information on your Facebook group, because, of course, our generation, I'll put us in the same generation. I'm not a big
Uh-huh.
Facebook person, but all my family is. My
Mhm.
brother, my sisters, their kids. Uh, how often does this group meet, or is it a constant thing that's going on?
Uh-huh. It's a constant thing. It goes on, you can go on there 24/7. The group is always there. You can post anytime. And I'll tell you, just about 24/7, you're going to get a response pretty quickly from someone who's up somewhere in the United States. Whether they're up in the middle of the night caring for their loved one and they check the group and they want to, have some connection. And like I said, some posts are very detailed and they write everything that happened and here's what happened at the doctor today or something like that. And then other things are just one line, help, or I'm really struggling today, or I just don't think I can do this anymore. And they'll get immediately so many people who aren't just saying, hang in there. They know what it's like. Another caregiver understands that feeling and can help lift you up from empathy in a way that others don't always understand. I think that's one of the things many caregivers say, that this group is their lifeline because they don't
Oh.
have a lot of other support. They don't have friends who understand, or family members who are caring and supporting them in what they're doing. So
So
it's
mention it again, what it is and where they can find it on Facebook.
It's on Facebook. It's the AARP Family Caregivers Discussion Group. And if you go on Facebook and do a search for AARP caregivers, it'll probably come up under the groups category. You can also just go to facebook.com/groups/AARP family caregivers. And that'll take you right to the group. It is a private group, so which means that you have to ask to join the group. And we work really hard to keep, scammers
People
and
that shouldn't
trollers.
be there out.
Right, because this is a very sensitive issue. And
Yeah.
so we ask you to answer a question. It's a very simple question, why are you interested in caregiving? How did you learn about the group? And, because the bots and things don't tend to answer the question. And then you agree to the group rules, and then you get accepted and you're in, and you can post anytime, or just a lot of people just read the other posts, and they'll some people will post when their loved one passes on and say, I wanted to let you know that my loved one passed on. I've never posted in the group, but I read all your posts and I've learned so much from you and I've gotten so much support. And, they just want someone who understands to know that their loved one, their caregiving journey is winding up. And, I want to just throw this in too, that part of the caregiving journey is life after caregiving, because grief is complicated when you've been caregiving. You're so entrenched in caring for this person. So you lose that role as the caregiver, as well as the person who's passed on. And then you got to try and get your life back together. And when you've had financial setbacks and health setbacks and stress and all of the other effects. So people stay in the group and we support each other through even that last part of the journey.
That's great, Amy. You've been very, very helpful in explaining all of this, and it's such a deep subject, and it's such a personal subject for virtually everyone, because the majority of people in this country, as you mentioned in your report, don't have the financial wherewithal to have nurses coming in all the time, and other people that they can pay to take care of their loved ones. And the burden falls on all of us. Uh, and it's a big burden. And you're so positive about this. I would be so depressed if I had your job.
You know, uh,
Give me
caring
some good
for
news. Give me a
I,
good
I've
story.
worked in this field for almost 40 years. I started out in direct service working in adult daycare centers and nursing homes. And I was a nurse. I was a music therapist originally. And
Okay.
so I did all kinds of wonderful activities with older adults and helped bring joy in their lives and help them improve their skills and all of those things. So that was a really good start for me because it's a very positive start. And I can tell you that while, I ended up in bankruptcy and I ended up with needing a knee replacement and stress and all of the things that happened, it was also incredibly joyful for me to take care of my family. And I don't have any regrets about that. I made a lot of sacrifices to do that, but I also got to be with them. I got that special time with them. I got to make their lives easier. My grandmother had Alzheimer's, and none of us lived in the town where they lived. So my grandfather was her caregiver, but he was 10 years older than she was. So eventually they needed paid care, and we monitored it from afar, and I would drive 6 hours to go and check on them and everything. But in the end, I didn't. And then in the end, they had to go to a nursing home for a short time, and they passed away. And I didn't want that for my parents. So I had the joy of taking care of them at home, giving them, a normal kind of life, a normal rhythm of life, even as their world got smaller and smaller. My mom had had a stroke and had other health issues, and that was big. And so I want to say that even though there's so much stress and there's so much difficulty, more than half of family caregivers report a sense of purpose and meaning from caregiving. And that is really, really important to note. And it's part of why they, as caregivers, should be honored and lifted up, because they are providing such an important service to their loved ones.
Well, Amy, it was a pleasure speaking to you about this. And I think that the two key things that I sense in this is, number one, there are resources out there for people. In particular, the AARP, which has been very, very beneficial to seniors, and also your Facebook group, which I know nothing about, but I will. I don't know. You may kick me out. You may not let me in, but but
I'll
I
look
think
for
it would be, you'll support me on that, maybe.
it. Yes, I will. I'll look for you.
Okay. I think that would be very interesting. Well, you found out I'm a real person. That's the best part.
Yes,
But I
exactly.
think that this conversation that we've had is one of the most significant conversations I've had on my podcast, and it makes me happy and sad at the same time. Um, so what do you? I don't know what else to say about
What do
it.
you do with that, huh? Yeah, I think, the thing is, things in our lives that are hard, that are challenging and difficult, are often the things that are most worth doing. So keep that perspective that,
That's a
you know,
great.
and
That's a
I've watched
great
so
thing.
many family caregivers go through a caregiving experience with very similar situations, and they don't all come out of it the same. And the biggest difference that I see is the attitude. It's how you view what you're doing. And one of the things I learned was I was not a victim as a caregiver. Everything we do is a choice. And many caregivers feel like I didn't have a choice. I had to do this because no one else will, or they don't have money to go to a nursing home, or whatever. Well, again, 40 years in the field, and I've seen many, many, many older people who have no one looking out for them. And it's not because they don't have family. They're just choosing to not do it for whatever reason. So if you do anything to help and care for someone, feel good about that. That's a choice you're making. And that's a much more empowered place to come from than I'm a victim. I have to do this because no one else will. That doesn't help us at all. It certainly doesn't help our loved ones, because that resentment, builds up and everything. Now, I'm not saying you have to be, everything's perfect, but that attitude alone can make a difference in how you come through the experience, and that it's not sad. I mean, the only thing that was really sad about it to me was, it's hard to see someone changing because of dementia that you love. My dad was a college professor, and to go through all of that. And it can be sad when someone passes away. But being a caregiver is something to feel proud about. And nobody's perfect. A lot of people are really hard on themselves. There's a lot of caregiver guilt because we feel like, I should be happier about this, or I should know the right answers, or I should have prevented my mom from getting that UTI, or I should have made sure my dad didn't fall. Nobody's perfect. We do not have control over everything, but we're there and we're doing our best. And that makes you a successful caregiver.
Right. I think that that's the most important thing, is that you're doing your best, whatever that is, that you're doing the best that you can. And we're all going to make mistakes, but
yes,
you're doing the best for the people that you care about. Okay.
Exactly. I really had to learn that myself because, you know, I felt like I wanted everything to be perfect for my parents, and that's just not always going to happen. But I did know the one thing I could promise them 100% was I was going to do my best, and I wasn't going to give up, and I was going to be there for them, and I would be there with them along the journey, however hard it got. And so then I felt like I was a success because I did do that.
Great. Okay. Well, Amy, I can't thank you enough for being so insightful and giving us such valuable information. And I want to thank you on behalf of all of the listeners. And I hope that they take the advice that you've given. And we're going to have information on our website for them. So I'm going to let everybody go now, but I want you to just stay on for another moment or so, because I want to talk to you after, just to make sure that the recording has been recorded. And I do have one more quote, and this one's from a lady. I don't really know who this lady is. Mother Teresa? No, I'm just kidding. This is her quote. What? Yeah. What? What kind of man are you? You don't read? It is not how much you do, but how much love you put in the doing. And I'd like to just end the podcast on that note. Okay. And again, Amy, thank you very much for being with us today. Okay. And that concludes this episode of We Are Olds, Get Over It. Thanks for joining me. I hope you found our conversation both insightful and entertaining. Remember, age is a journey, not a destination. So embrace the wrinkles, the forgetfulness, and the occasional tech frustrations with a good dose of get over it attitude. Until next time, keep laughing, keep learning, and keep getting over it. Ken out.